Welcome to the podcast, Peh Linde. Nice to have you on here. You have an interesting story and some things to share with us that I think a lot of people will find fascinating. So, obviously, we're going to be talking about sound healing. But first of all, let's hear a little bit about you. Where are you from? What kind of encouraged you to go into sound healing? How did you get here?
Okay. So I'm from Singapore and I was originally a music producer for more than 10 years. But during COVID, I had so much free time. So I started meditating and things just started changing once I started meditating. And my music jobs just got more and more spiritual in nature. And there was one time I was doing a show. I was like the sound designer for a live theatre project. And there was one segment that included a singing bowl sound healer. So that was what got me interested because I could feel a lot of sensations when I heard the singing bowls, and sometimes I even saw visions of stuff. Yeah, so that got me really interested, and that person eventually became my teacher and my mentor. Yeah. So I picked up the singing bowls, and within a year, I don't know, things just kind of escalated. And I sold my apartment in Singapore. I started traveling full time. So now I'm doing sound healing and also quantum healing for my clients. Yeah.
Cool. For the purpose of the listeners, what is some of those things that you spoke about? So the sound healing bowls, I see one behind you actually.
Yeah.
And yeah, what is some of those things? How would you describe some of those things?
Mm, okay, so for example, sound healing is. Have you had any experience with sound healing?
I do. I do some sound baths sometimes, and I listen to different frequencies to go to sleep or when I'm meditating, when I'm doing something creative.
Yeah. And so, how do the singing bowls make you feel, like in a sound bath?
Um, it changes for the different things that I use it for. So I guess I'll use those examples that I gave. So when I'm going to sleep, it helps me switch my mind off, which is a very hard thing to do because my mind goes 100 mile an hour, especially when I'm going to sleep, it wakes up. So I use the sound healing then, which it helps me kind of just tune out the noise from my mind and the day, and it helps me feel calmer. Um, the creative stuff, if I use some of it for creative stuff, it helps me to kind of let go a little bit, and I suppose you could say relax again, but um, yeah, get into a bit more of a zone rather than having like a fixation on an outcome, or it allows me to kind of let the flow happen and not be kind of in my head so much. Um, yeah, mostly those kind of areas. I guess mostly around relaxation.
Yeah. So you nailed it perfectly. The singing bowls can actually help us to relax on a mental level. And once mentally you are relaxed, you realize that, emotionally, I feel better as well. You feel less tense, um, not so stressed. And if, for example, you go to a sound bath and you are physically present with the singing bowls, actually they affect you on a physical level as well. Yeah, because the vibrations actually permeate your body, go into your cells, and we are mostly water. So you can just imagine the vibrations actually vibrating the water and even your blood, and it helps with detoxifying, and cleansing your body basically. Yeah. And sometimes when we are too tense, our body, there will be certain parts of our body or our organs that actually tense up as well. Yeah. So I think over time, if this tension is not released, it would actually result in illnesses in the body. Yeah. So physically, it helps in this way. And I would say that from a spiritual perspective, it is also useful because once our body is relaxed, our mind is relaxed, our emotions are pretty calm, we actually are able to get more clarity and just feel more attuned to what we call the higher self, where the greatest wisdom actually lies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I also kind of read up a lot about some of this stuff that you've spoken about as well, and I think I definitely can resonate with some of the things that you spoke about there, and it is kind of on a physical, mental, spiritual level, isn't it? A lot of this, and scientifically proven as well, which people don't always recognize or notice, and it's not something so much in mainstream services, support systems. It's something kind of in the background, isn't it? But it's actually something that is really, really helpful in a lot of ways. And specifically with trauma, this is something that I kind of come up across a lot of, I suppose, linking in what you said about it helping kind of relax and not be tense in your body physically. So obviously trauma, emotions, is stored in the body. So when you can kind of tune into some of these frequencies, what that does is it helps some of those things kind of soften, and you be able to access things beyond like defense mechanisms. For example, if you struggle to open up, or if your body is like so tense, your jaws clenched, like it can help with a lot of the things that are psychologically going on for you as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uh, where does it come from? So there's a lot of things there in how it shows up, and we'll go into some more parts of that too. But where does it come from? Where does it originate? Some of these things.
I think, actually, I'm not exactly sure as well, but I think it originates from the Tibetan tradition. Yeah, and it's usually found in the Himalayan regions. So, like, my bowls are from Nepal, and the makers of the bowls have been doing this for more than 100 years of lineage. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, for example, my bowls, they are made from like 7 different types of metals.
Oh,
And yeah, so it actually sort of like causes a resonance within the different metals in our body as well. And as the sound is so, I would say, healing, and it kind of flows a certain way, it actually entrains the cells in our body to actually perform from a more harmonious perspective. Yeah, so it creates harmony within the body as well. Yeah.
uh, yeah. I also read some parts about where it's from too. I think there's a lot of other things that kind of come into it. I'm not sure how much these are linked, but these are things that I've researched a little bit as well around sound overall. So not just the sound bowls, but there's lots of other methods that will use sound for healing as well. So you could link it back to tribal era even, and chanting, and some spiritual practices with indigenous people around the world as well, or even kind of in Australia, the classic didgeridoo that everyone knows of. They use that in kind of a healing format too. So these things, they're not brand new, are they? They go way back, and they're all kind of, I guess, part of a family, a healing sound family in some ways as well. Are any of those things that you've come across as well, or any other practices that you've, yeah, kind of integrated in?
Actually, interestingly, I also did a life coaching course, and I actually integrate a lot of life coaching aspects into sound healing. Yeah, especially for my private clients. Because what I realize is that at the end of the day, for change to happen in a person's life, they have to have awareness first and foremost, and ultimately take action and to make like create changes in their life. So if someone is feeling very stressed and they go to a sound healing session, after that, oh, they feel so relaxed, but they go back to their old patterns of ways and old ways of being, then basically nothing much would change. Yeah. So usually I would ask the client questions and ask if they have any specific intentions or any outcomes that they wish to create permanently in their lives before I go into a session. And then usually after the session, they will be so relaxed. And that's when their intuition actually comes into play. And you can then ask them questions like, so what possible actions do you think you could take to actually improve your life? And then they would come up with things that they probably wouldn't come up with usually. Yeah. And I mean, of course, once they go back, it's up to them to implement it. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Sometimes the real work happens outside of session. I see this also in therapy. You kind of stir things up in session, and then the real work and the real change happens around it and in life.
Yeah.
Yeah. What does a session look like? If someone is coming for a sound healing session with you, what does it look like? What do they have to do? What do they have to wear? Like, what kind of comes into it?
So basically, they just have to come in something comfortable. They would be lying down for most of the session. Yeah, and it starts off with this thing I call aura cleansing. So, for example, once we leave the house and we go to take public transport or hang out amongst other people, basically, a lot of times we are subconsciously taking on a lot of other people's energies. Yeah, so sometimes even if you feel that, oh, I didn't go out and do much, I just went to buy some groceries, but how come I feel so drained when I come home? Yeah, it's because sometimes we may be accidentally taking on people's energies. Yeah, so I do this thing called aura cleansing, where I would just take the big bowl and just cleanse the space around them. So that's the first layer of release, I would say. And subsequently, I would do this thing called back therapy. So the client would lie on their tummies, and I will place the bowl on the back. Yeah, so I'll start off at the base of the spine and move upwards and then come down again. Yeah, so throughout this process, I would, yeah, so this is actually kind of like the physical relaxation process because they can directly feel the vibrations going through the bones into the spine and into the nerves and into the entire part of the body. Yeah. So it would be about maybe 25 minutes into the session by this point. And the last part would be for them to lie down, face up. And I would place different bowls around the body, corresponding to the different energetic centers, or what the yoga people would call chakras. Yeah. So different bowls would be aligned with the different chakra points. Yeah, just to do an energetic alignment for the body. Something interesting that I've observed coming from a music producer background is that without anybody there, the bowl would have a certain kind of sound, a certain texture to the sound. And when I place the bowls around the body, if the client has, let's say, some problems with the digestion or the tummy, the bowl corresponding to that part of the body would actually sound different from usual.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I would be like, oh, okay, sounds different. And then once I start playing the bowls throughout the whole process, that bowl would start sounding better and better.
In your perspective, what is it that's going on when something like that happens? What is it that's influencing that sound change?
Scientifically, I think it's like, so actually all of our cells are mostly air, right? We know that. And so what is in that air or that empty space? I think it's energy. And so it's like if the energy is clear, waves can pass through it easily. So like the waves of the bowls would be able to pass through them, and they would be sounding as if there's no one there, like what it usually sounds like. But if there is some kind of stuck energy, it is more dense, then it's like the waves would encounter some kind of resistance, and therefore it would sound different. Yeah. And how bad it sounds is usually corresponding to how bad the situation is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Is that blockage from letting it flow through
Yeah.
that changes that sound in there as well? When you talk about higher self and the spiritual elements of some of this, what do you mean by that?
I would refer to it as the highest form of ourself operating from the most macro point of view. Yeah. So, for example, okay, this is a line, right? And we call this the timeline. So we are here and we can see, okay, what's happening tomorrow, what's going to happen, what happened the day before, and perhaps even our plans 1 month ahead, and we can kind of see, okay, ourselves 2 years ahead, right? But sometimes during meditation, people get into an altered state of consciousness and their frequency raises, and so they are no longer on this timeline and just seeing things from this perspective. They would travel upwards, and you realize that the higher you go, the further you are able to see. Yeah, and so that is why when some people get to this point, they can start to see their past lives, or they could start to see possible future timelines of what they are guided to do. Yeah. So I think this is the perspective of the higher self. Yeah.
Why is it important to access your higher self and to enter into those states of subconsciousness?
I would say that actually our higher self is always with us because we are all one. It's just that sometimes we are too focused on the micro that we don't see the macro. Like, for example, something bad, like something we perceive as bad happened today to me. But if I zoom out and look at things from another perspective, I would realize that, oh, this thing is actually serving me. The lesson that I learned here will actually be able to help me in future. Yeah, and so I won't be, sort of like depressed about the situation or angry or be stuck in a not so positive emotion. Yeah, so connecting with our higher self enables us to look at things from a different perspective. And generally, I think you would be a happier person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it changes the suffering that we kind of sometimes get bogged down in and consumed. And it's not minimizing people's problems, but sometimes we get to see the bigger picture in things, or we can try and fix things that actually we just need to kind of let flow. And I see some of this stuff come up also in therapy, but obviously kind of a lot of the time looking backwards. And when people reflect over their lives, they can understand that some things are bad that have happened and in our experiences, but we can learn from all of them. And it's recognizing that, isn't it? And it can be really hard in the moment when something's really, really hard and consuming and it feels like a real battle for us. But when you do look back, you recognize that actually this really changed me and I learned a lot from it, and I can be a better person. I can push myself beyond the limits that I thought that I had. And is recognizing that, isn't it? But from a present tense as opposed to always kind of looking backwards and trying to tune into that. The different levels of consciousness. So this is also something I'm fairly familiar with. I find it very fascinating in regards to accessing different levels of consciousness, because again, the trauma work that I do a lot of, it can help get past those defense mechanisms. It can help process emotions at a deeper level. But what would be the levels of consciousness for something like this? How would you describe some of those things?
Mm, I wouldn't really describe it as levels of consciousness. Yeah. For me, consciousness is just one thing. And so maybe in meditation, we would simply be accessing a different part of consciousness or another perspective of consciousness.
And what would some of those parts be?
Maybe some people would connect with their spirit guides. Maybe some people would connect with, let's say, their star family from different star systems. Maybe some people could access their past lives or their future lives. Yeah, themselves in different forms, not just as like a humanoid form. Yeah. So all these things that are happening are all part of consciousness, and how basically how infinite the possibilities can be within consciousness itself. Yeah.
Yeah. And what would you say a breakthrough looks like? So, in people that you've worked with, what has been some of the things that you've noticed in that person, or that they've also fed back maybe and spoken about how things have changed for them?
For most of my clients, because I actually do this while I'm traveling, so for most of them, I pretty much don't really keep in touch, or I would never ever see them again. Yeah, but some of the more interesting sessions, I could give an example. There was one time I was in Montenegro and I met this girl. She's like maybe 20, 22, and I did a session for her. I didn't even get to put the bow on her. I merely did the aura cleansing and she started crying. Yeah, and she said like, my heart feels so pain, and I feel like I cannot breathe. It feels really bad. And okay, so that was when I made use of my life coaching skills. Yeah, and that was when she kind of calmed down and she felt better already. So I proceeded to put the bow on her and continue the session. And so after the session, she shared that she was actually sexually assaulted before. So the waves of the bows made her more relaxed, and suddenly she could feel her emotions. Yeah, because she actually couldn't feel anything since that incident happened. Yeah, so once she could feel the emotions, it was brought up and then kind of released a little. Yeah. Prior to that, I didn't know her story, and it felt like she was a very suppressed person. Yeah, but after the session, I think about 2 or 3 days later, I saw her again, and she said, "Hey, I'm actually planning to travel to Italy. Yeah, because I feel that I want to expand my horizons and I want to learn new things about the world." That was a pretty memorable session for me.
Yeah, I can see why. There's a lot in there, isn't there? And thank you for sharing that. It's quite remarkable in how something like that was able to give her freedom almost, not in the way of travel, but of course that happened too, but in her own body and not being trapped in the things that happen.
Yeah, but I would say that the session probably did help her in a positive way. But when it comes to these kind of situations, usually it takes many layers of processing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's complex, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you find that, so you mentioned a few times about traveling the world doing a lot of this. Do you find that there are different countries that engage differently with it, or there are different beliefs that kind of come into it? Are different places more susceptible, or is there more practices in certain areas too?
Yeah, for sure. Every country is different in its own way, and there are countries where people are more open and more accepting and more curious, I would say, even if it's something that they haven't come across before.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have certain places that you go where there's like a community, or any place where you do kind of training or learning, or um, yeah, kind of going back to any of the original source or anything like that?
Yeah, I think actually Crete in Greece has quite a conscious spiritual community, and like people from different places kind of somehow found themselves on that island, and they offer different modalities of healing. And also Antalya, actually, yeah, in Turkey.
Okay. The other parts of some of the stuff that you do too. So obviously, kind of we spoke a little bit before recording today, and you spoke a little bit about quantum hypnosis too in some of the practice that you have. Can you tell us a little bit about that too?
Quantum hypnosis, it sounds so sophisticated, but it's not that sophisticated. It's pretty much just meditation, but a really, really deep kind of meditation. And sometimes people see like a future timeline, and so the future is basically not fixed. We can decide what kind of future we want. So what they see is just one possibility. I would then ask them, okay, is this what you would want to create in this life of yours? And if they say, yeah, 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 this seems interesting, I want to connect with this timeline. And then I would ask, okay, I would ask the spirit guides.
Interesting. So the timeline plays a key role in a lot of the kind of sound healing stuff, but also in the quantum hypnosis as well. I think it's interesting, this kind of area, because people think it's a lot of kind of woo-woo type spiritual practice type stuff, and they don't realize that actually hypnosis in the original format, and again another scientifically proven area, is more common, and we even access some of it in our day-to-day ourselves without realizing. So daydreaming, most people have daydreamed at some point in their life, and dreaming at night, even you could say driving, or things that you do that you kind of go into that autopilot mode almost, and those are kind of micro versions, aren't they, of some of this. And obviously what you're doing and what you're talking about is creating the space to access some of those things for healing purposes. So it's intentional, isn't it? It's not just kind of driving along and being on autopilot. In the kind of imagery versions of some of this stuff, why is imagery important for us? Why is it that we can access some of this stuff through that format, and why is that healing for us?
Mm-hmm. Mm, I would say that actually imagination and creativity is all source energy. It's basically creation energy. But in a quantum healing session, it is so not necessarily that the client sees something. Yeah, because we have many different faculties and they are all very complex. Some people simply get a sensing. Yeah, some people simply just know, and some people hear things, or some even smell. But smelling things is kind of more rare. Yeah.
So around sensory
Yeah.
stimuli mostly, but not necessarily an actual version. I mean, I think it's interesting because what you just described there kind of got my cogs turning in. Again, there's lots of studies around we process quicker as humans in visual format. So a picture of something, we would process it quicker than an essay of something written, for example. And I think it's version that is a lot of the time forgotten about, and it explains why we take in different things that, for example, marketing, a lot of it's visual for that reason, and we subconsciously are absorbing visual stuff coming in and out. And yeah, in kind of, again, trauma experiences, a lot of the time it's kind of flashback memories, visuals, things that come up, dreams, nightmares, and the visual versions that we experience, it kind of explains where some of that comes from, of what you've kind of just described there, in how we are as humans and how some of this comes out.
Yeah, you describe it perfectly. Yeah, and it's also because, yeah, like you said, like a picture describes 1,000 things. It's more than 1,000 words. Yeah, and it's also like imagery is linked to the right side of our brain, the right brain, and that links directly to the subconscious. And most of the time, on a day-to-day basis, we are operating on a most of us use our left brains more, like being logical, being pragmatic. Yeah, so we are actually depriving ourselves of half of the information, another half of the information. Yeah, and so when we connect with imagery or imagination and the right side of our brain, we can possibly access so much more that is could be helpful for us. Yeah.
Yeah, in form of emotions and some of the deeper things that are going on for us, identity, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I use some creative techniques in therapy sessions too. It doesn't land for everyone, it's not for everyone, but it does, I notice it does go a lot deeper than revisiting someone's story, for example, and not minimizing that either, because those things are important. It's important to talk about some of that stuff, but some things are beyond words, aren't they? Some things are felt, some things are instinct, some things are pure emotion, and not always the positive emotions, which is always really hard for people to kind of grasp too. So you mentioned you're a music producer too. Do you integrate any of music stuff? Do you record any sound healing stuff? Do you have any versions that kind of bring both of those things together?
So I have done some singing bowl recordings, and I know precisely how to place the mic to get the best sound. I know how to edit the sound in terms of like the technical stuff, the EQ and the frequencies and stuff in production software. I know how to add reverb to the sound to make it sound nicer. Yeah, so, and I had collaborated once with a friend who is a channeler, and she does light language. So I actually create the whole background music that includes music production, and I recorded some singing bowls, and I also edited her light language and her voice into the track. Yeah, so that track is really good.
I could talk about some of this stuff all day. This is very fascinating. Is there a difference? You just kind of made me think about some of the formats that I listen to are the digital versions. I have different playlists on my Spotify and sometimes on YouTube. Occasionally I will go to kind of a sound bath thing, but it's not as common as the other things that I access. Is there a difference in digital format as opposed to live format?
Yeah, for sure. So I think digital versions are very good, you know, especially when it's so convenient, we can just access it anytime. Yeah, but for live versions of sound bath, like I said, you can experience it physically in your physical body when the vibrations pass through the body. Yeah, so it's different in that sense. So I would recommend, therefore, live versions, if you can make it. Yeah.
Possible.
If possible, yeah.
Okay. For someone thinking about some of this stuff, you've given us lots of food for thought. What would you recommend as an introduction to kind of just get a first experience, or where should they research? How should they find someone? How should they find someone that knows what they're doing and is genuine.
I would recommend them to just make a decision and try something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because websites can look so good, they can contain so much information, and it can make the product sound like wow, it's amazing. But you would never ever know until you go there in person and try a sound bath from a person, a practitioner. Try a couple of choices and see which practitioner resonates most with you, which practitioner makes you feel most comfortable, and which practitioner speaks your language. Yeah, I think that's the most important thing because we are all very unique individuals. Yeah, and different things just spark us differently. So, yeah.
Very well put, very well put. Where can people search for practitioners?
Google, Google, Instagram.
How do you feel about giving us a mini introduction now? I see, obviously, you have your sound ball behind you. Do you feel you want to give us an experience? Mini version?
Mini version? Okay, sure. Mm, how about I move us over there where I have my
Across?
bowls and yeah. Okay. Yeah, okay. So where could I place you? Let me just shift this a little. Okay. Something like that. Okay. Yeah, so you can simply close your eyes and there's nothing that you need to do. You can simply just breathe deeper if you feel called to. And just allow the sound to take you wherever you need to go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
hope the
have
sound
some
is okay.
visuals. Yeah, I have some visuals that I am gonna journal about after.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Do you want to share some of them?
Yeah, I can. Some of it is a little bit dark. So I visualized the ocean, and yeah, kind of a really strong tide and like waves crashing all over the place. And then when the sound kind of went further, it was kind of that ripple effect and it started calming out the sea. And then I was kind of on the shore, and yeah, like took a really like deep breath, but it was kind of like the first breath and a little bit panicky, in honesty. But eventually the sea calmed, and yeah, there was a lot of visual format to some of that as well. I didn't expect so much. I use a lot of this stuff anyway myself in a lot of ways. I'm used to visualizing, so I can literally kind of switch from visual format to text format. I process a lot in visual too, so those things are easily accessible to me. But yeah, I didn't expect quite so much from the mini experience today.
Uh-huh. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, would be interested to know once you journal, if you want to share, like what that tide was linked to, what kind of emotions or things do they pertain to in your life? Yeah.
Hmm, good prompts there. I shall follow up with my journal reflection.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that you experience a very interesting life and you have a lot of wisdom, and wisdom kind of beyond the human form that we have, as you kind of put it as well, kind of from a higher self. If you was talking to someone that's struggling right now or has a lot going on, there's a lot going on in the world, there's a lot of people experiencing trauma and loss and stress and chronic stress, even, what would you say about bringing it back to the person? What advice would you give to just bring it inward and bring it to kind of their own consciousness again and their own timeline, and not get swept away by all of the things that are happening, all of the things that have happened in the past? What advice would you give, do you think, if you was to kind of just give some final prompts there?
I think that the simplest thing that anyone can do is to simply create space for themselves. Yeah. It can be in the form of time, just taking time for themselves. It could be in a very busy day, just to sit down for maybe 30 seconds and just to stay with their breath, like focus on their breathing and observe how shallow it usually is, and then, just taking in deep breaths. Yeah. And I think observing the breath is something that we can do even while we are talking. Yeah. Yeah.
Also, something that people forget a lot of the time and don't necessarily tune into themselves. There's such a fast-paced life, isn't there, that we've created as humans. I don't know why it's gone this way, but it's not so healthy. And sometimes we just have to just remember to breathe and let it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Some very interesting things that we've spoken about today. How can people find you? We're obviously going to tag you on the platforms in some of the content, but how can people find you if they want to get some advice on some of this stuff, want to experience a sound healing stuff with you, if you're traveling in their country, of course, or maybe online stuff? How can people reach you?
Yeah, I have a website, so it's pehlinde.com. And I'm also on Instagram, Singing Bowl Traveler.
We'll also tag you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you for being a guest on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.